Welcome back to Sissy Maya. Make sure to subscribe to our channel to never miss an update. Additionally, consider subscribing to my Patreon to get access to these features, and much more. The screech of tires against the wet tarmac echoed through the air as cars drove by at a steady, slow pace. The sky, heavy with dull grey clouds, threatened rain. Water dripped from windows, car roofs, tree leaves, and walls. A cool breeze swirled around the street corners, and most people quickly sought shelter in nearby shops or homes. The sidewalks grew emptier as the evening progressed, shops began to close, and the few remaining pedestrians, mostly students heading home after their studies, disappeared. The small hand on the church tower clicked over to 6 o'clock, and the bell tolled across the miles of countryside. The town fell eerily quiet, as if holding its breath, with only the distant sound of waves crashing against the rocks breaking the stillness. It was a ghost town. The rumble of a bus pulling into a shelter shook the ground. The doors hissed open, and two figures stepped off, an elderly woman and a young man named Emma Moran. Tall and skinny, Emma had shaggy black hair and sharp, angular features. His eyes, heavy and distant, seemed to carry a sense of sadness. His long nose and unremarkable lips gave him a unique yet striking appearance. There was an odd mixture of awkwardness and seriousness about him, as if his very presence was slightly out of place. As the bus drove away with another hiss, Emma watched the old woman hobble down the street, leaving him alone on the barren pavement. His bags and trunk lay at his feet. With a deep sigh, he sat down on the bench beneath the bus shelter and placed his large trunk beside him. He unzipped one of the side pockets and pulled out a piece of paper with a picture of a house on it, a large square structure with 4 windows, a red door with a circular window, and a small garden. It was right by the sea. Emma stared at the picture for a moment, deep in thought. He peeked out from the shelter, scanning the street for any sign of the house. It wasn't here. It must be further out of town. He stood up, grabbed his bags, and began walking along the boardwalk that stretched beside the beach. He inhaled the fresh sea air, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. The city, with its smoke and fumes, seemed miles away. The beachside town was a far cry from his previous life, and for Emma, it felt like a much-needed escape. As he walked, he passed various seaside businesses, ice cream parlors, arcades, casinos, and restaurants, each one more quaint than the last. Emma had moved here to escape everything. At 20, he had dropped out of college and was spiraling into a mess of poor decisions. His uncle, the only family he had left, had finally had enough of him. "Get out," his uncle had yelled. "Find your own way in life." It wasn't an exaggeration to say that Emma and his Uncle Joe hated each other. They had never gotten along. Joe, a hard-working man from a working-class background, had always resented Emma's lack of direction. Emma's father had disappeared before he was born, and his mother had never been interested in him. As a child, he was passed around from friend to friend. It was no wonder that Joe had thrown him out when he'd turned 20. Emma had no family left, and Joe had given up on him long ago. But Emma wasn't moving to the seaside town alone. His best friend, Rob, had moved into the house a day earlier. Rob was Emma's polar opposite, ambitious, hardworking, and from a tight-knit family. At 22, he had completed his degree in engineering at a top university. Rob had been hesitant at first when Emma suggested they take a break and move to the quiet town, but eventually, he had agreed. He deserved it, after all. Emma walked along the wooden boardwalk, his trunk dragging behind him. The faint scent of seaweed lingered in the air. Within minutes, he reached the edge of the town, where the path curved sharply, leading into the countryside. There it was, the 2-story house he'd been searching for, standing alone at the end of the street. It was the last house in town. Emma glanced at the picture in his hand and then back at the house. This was it. The house was surrounded by a crooked stone wall with a rickety wooden gate at the front. It was large and square, whitewashed, though weathered with age. The red door and large windows matched the picture Emma had in his hand. He glanced back at the crashing waves against the sharp rocks just off the road before he struggled to carry his bags up to the door. After knocking 3 times, the door quickly swung open, and Rob's face appeared. "Emma," he exclaimed, a smile lighting up his face. "Hey, man, how's it going?" Emma responded, trying to mask his excitement. "Not much, still getting settled in," Rob said. "Let me grab your stuff." He grabbed the heaviest bag, the trunk, and heaved it inside, setting it down in the hallway with a thud. Emma quickly followed, tossing in his lighter bags and dusting his hands off before stepping inside. As his foot hit the floor, a cold shiver ran down his spine, and the hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. The place was freezing. "It's pretty cold in here, huh?" Emma said, rubbing his arms for warmth. "Yeah," Rob replied, his smile fading slightly. "I've tried turning on the heating, but it doesn't seem to work." "That's strange," Emma muttered under his breath. The entrance hall was large and square, with a high ceiling that reached up to the second floor. To his right was an archway leading into the dining room and kitchen, and to his left, another arch led into the sitting room. A staircase ran along the left side of the hall, its banister curving up to a balcony overlooking the space below. At the far end of the room, a hallway stretched toward a small bathroom and a utility room that connected to the kitchen. The place was dusty, and it looked like it hadn't been lived in for years. The walls were bare, and the dark wooden floorboards creaked beneath their feet. It was in dire need of a makeover. Rob clapped his hands together and grinned as he stood next to Emma, who was gazing up at the ceiling, which bore a large damp stain. "It could use some work, but I can't believe we got this place for such a low rent," Rob said, his voice filled with enthusiasm. Emma didn't respond. His attention was caught by the eerie feeling that seemed to hang in the air. Something about the house made him feel uneasy, like someone was watching them. He couldn't shake the sensation. Meanwhile, Rob continued to chatter excitedly. "Just think of the parties we can throw here," Rob said. "It's a bit off the beaten path, but once people see what we do with this place, they'll be here in no time." "Yeah, sure," Emma muttered, not really paying attention. He walked around the hall, eyeing every corner with growing suspicion. He was beginning to understand why the rent was so cheap. The place felt unsettling, almost as if it were alive. He couldn't explain it, but it made him feel uncomfortable. "Hey, you okay?" Rob asked, noticing Emma's distracted expression. "Huh?" Emma snapped out of his thoughts. "You seem a bit off," Rob said, his voice laced with concern. "Everything all right?" Emma forced a smile. Yeah, just a little tired and hungry after the long bus ride," he muttered. "Well, I was just about to start dinner," Rob said with a grin. "You can cook?" Emma raised an eyebrow in disbelief. "I've never cooked before," Rob admitted, "but hey, there's a first time for everything." A few moments later, Rob stood at the stove, poking around like a confused monkey, trying to figure out how to turn it on. Emma sat on a high stool beside the kitchen island, amused by Rob's lack of cooking skills. "Where's the damn thing?" Rob muttered, peering behind the stove. "Try that lever," Emma suggested, pointing at a red switch next to the stove. Rob bent down, reaching for the lever and turning it. The hiss of gas followed, and the stove lit up. He looked up, beaming with pride. "I'm getting the hang of this," he said, grinning. "Yeah, you're a regular chef," Emma teased, sarcasm dripping from his words. Not long after, Rob and Emma were frantically throwing water into the oven, trying to put out the smoke, coughing and sputtering as they did so. "Christ, I didn't know you were this bad," Emma yelled over the chaos. "How did you survive college?" "Don't blame me," Rob shouted back. "I lived with 2 girls. They did all the cooking." Once the smoke cleared, the two stood in silence, catching their breath. "Takeout?" Rob asked, still gasping. "Sounds good to me," Emma agreed. Rob headed out to grab some Chinese takeout. Meanwhile, Emma sat on the old mattress in his new room, the bare walls and damp atmosphere making the place feel even more oppressive. The room was modest, but just the way he liked it. A mattress, bedside table, chest of drawers, and wardrobe were all the furnishings it needed. He opened the window to let in some fresh air and unpacked his clothes, placing them into the drawers and hanging them in the wardrobe. The rest of his belongings stayed in his trunk, lying at the foot of the bed. The room needed some decoration, but for now, it would do. Unpacking helped distract Emma from the strange, uneasy feeling that had crept over him when he first entered the house. But once he finished, the discomfort returned, settling deep in his stomach. He sat in his new bedroom, feeling slightly scared and overwhelmed by the cold, barren walls. His body felt heavy and nauseous, a mix of unease and fear swirling inside him. He stood up abruptly, leaving the room and hurrying down the stairs, breath coming fast. His eyes were wide with fear. As he descended, the house suddenly jerked to the side, throwing him off balance. Dust fell from the ceiling as the walls seemed to tremble. His head collided with the drywall, leaving him dazed as he tumbled down the last steps. The shaking stopped, and Emma lay groaning on the floor. "Shit," he groaned, rubbing his sore head as he pushed himself up. Shaking off the dizziness, he managed to stand, his vision clearing. The house was eerily quiet again. At first, he thought it had been an earthquake, but quickly realized there hadn't been a quake of that magnitude in this area. The unsettling feeling faded briefly before creeping back. He scanned the room, his gaze darting from corner to corner, holding his breath, waiting for something else to happen. 5 minutes later, Rob arrived at the gate and found Emma sitting on the porch, a wet cloth pressed to his forehead. "What happened, Emma?" Rob asked, walking up the path. "What do you mean?" "The earthquake," Emma replied, confused. "Earthquake?" Rob raised an eyebrow. "There was no earthquake," he scoffed. "The house shook to its damn foundations just 10 minutes ago," Emma yelled, frustration bubbling up. "All right, calm down," Rob said, holding the takeout bag under his arm. "If there had been an earthquake, the whole town would have felt it." "But that doesn't make sense," Emma snapped, still clutching the cloth to his forehead. "Did you hit your head?" Rob asked, noticing the bump on Emma's forehead. "Did I?" "Yes," Emma said irritably. "But that doesn't mean I'm wrong." "Well, there's your answer. You hit your head and you're a little mixed up," Rob said as he walked past Emma. Emma leaned against the doorframe, dabbing his forehead, feeling utterly exhausted. Could I have imagined it? He wondered. Why doesn't Rob feel the same way? Why can't he sense the weirdness in this place? "Emma, come get your food," Rob called from the kitchen. Emma walked inside and sat down to eat. "Imagine being Chinese and eating this every day," Rob joked between bites. Emma didn't answer, picking at his egg-fried rice. He was deep in thought. Should he tell Rob how he felt? "What do you think of the new place?" Rob asked, trying to start a conversation. Emma paused. It felt right, to be honest. "It's fine," he said. "It just feels off." "Off? How so?" Rob asked, chewing on a rib. "I know it sounds crazy, but it feels like someone's watching us," Emma admitted, glancing around the kitchen, feeling embarrassed. "I'm just getting bad vibes from this place." "How hard did you hit your head?" Rob asked again, looking concerned. "Enough about my head," Emma snapped. "This place gives me the creeps, and you won't even listen. You've been here a few hours and already you hate it." "You picked it," Rob retorted, irritated. "You just don't get it," Emma replied, standing up and putting his plate in the sink. "Where are you going?" Rob asked, noticing Emma heading for the door. "I'm going for a walk," Emma muttered as he grabbed his coat. He walked down the front path, pushed open the rickety gate, and set off toward the town. The strange feeling lifted as he walked, and he began to feel more at ease, though his mind was still racing. Doubt crept in. Was moving to Hollertown a mistake? Why didn't Rob sense anything strange? Why couldn't Rob feel what Emma did? As Emma walked along the wooden boardwalk by the sea, the sun began to peek through the grey clouds, casting rays of light over the town. The sea sparkled with millions of reflections, and the low hum of cars and wind echoed through the streets. It was about 3 in the afternoon. Emma crossed the road and strolled down a narrow cobblestone street lined with small shops selling everything from detergent to woolen sweaters. A few people wandered the streets, mostly adults and a couple of schoolchildren. It didn't take long for Emma to notice how friendly the people of Hollytown were, smiling at one another and greeting passers-by. The place felt welcoming, and Emma began to relax. He walked through the town square, where a large fountain stood in the center. A nearby chip shop was filled with teenage boys in school uniforms, laughing and chatting. Emma continued past the train station, reaching the far end of town, near the secondary school. The large Victorian building was surrounded by a tall red brick wall, and the steel gates were open to the long avenue leading up to the entrance. The distant sound of a bell rang out, and Emma decided it was time to leave. He was relieved to be done with school. That was the place he had hated most. Emma returned to the house around 5 o'clock. In the sitting room, Rob sat drinking a bottle of Coke and smoking a cigarette, looking visibly frustrated. Emma leaned against the archway, staring down at his feet. The uneasy feeling had returned, creeping back into his mind. "I feel it," Rob said softly. Emma didn't respond, but he was relieved to know he wasn't imagining things. Rob sat silently, not meeting Emma's eyes. "Maybe the place is haunted," Rob joked. "I hope not," Emma replied, though his voice lacked conviction. "That stuff doesn't exist." "Yeah, I know. It feels like something else, but I can't quite put your finger on it." Emma finished for him. "Yeah, I feel the same." Rob tossed his cigarette into the fireplace and drank the last of his soda. He stood up and walked over to Emma, stopping in front of him and looking into his eyes. "I think we should get OU." Suddenly, a loud, droning horn pierced the air, and the house began to shake violently. The floorboards rattled under the noise, and Emma covered his ears, pleading for it to stop. Rob was thrown across the room, slamming into the wall with a scream. Emma fell to the floor, the noise unbearable. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and the kitchen cutlery smashed against the floor. Emma screamed, desperate for the noise to cease. Then, as suddenly as it started, the shaking stopped, and everything fell eerily silent. Rob slowly picked himself up from the ground, rubbing his head, covered in dust and looking dazed. Emma groggily climbed to his feet, scanning the room. "You okay?" Emma asked, his voice shaky. "I'm fine. Are you?" Rob mumbled. Emma nodded, still not blinking, his breath caught in his chest. He and Rob locked eyes in a trance, both shaken and unable to move. Emma broke the stare and turned toward the stairs. "Where are you going?" Rob's voice trembled. "I think there's something upstairs," Emma said, his hand gripping the banister. "Is something or someone?" Rob asked, his voice faltering. "Sure," Emma hushed him, motioning for quiet. He climbed the stairs slowly, one step at a time, his mind fixated on the strange pull he felt. Rob followed reluctantly behind him, clearly uneasy. Emma's instincts screamed that something was off upstairs, but he couldn't explain it. He felt an overwhelming urge to go to his bedroom. When he reached the top of the stairs, he turned toward his bedroom door. He lifted his foot over the last step and walked down the hallway. Rob decided to check his own room, which was at the other end of the hall. All that could be heard was the distant sound of the waves crashing outside, adding to the eerie atmosphere. Emma's breathing became faster as he approached his bedroom door. His heart pounded as he turned the doorknob and pushed it open. To his relief, the room was exactly as he had left it. He stepped inside, feeling a bit foolish for being so afraid of nothing. "Rob, it's okay. Everything's..." Suddenly, the door slammed shut with a loud bang, accompanied by a blinding flash of white light. "Arg!" Emma cried, shielding his eyes with his arm. He stumbled backward, disoriented. When his vision returned, his jaw dropped in shock. The room had completely transformed. The bright yellow walls were plastered with posters of boy bands, idols, and teddy bears. The bed was covered in white sheets with yellow polka dots, and a dresser was now filled with makeup, nail polish, brushes, and lipstick. A desk had appeared, piled high with schoolbooks, and teddy bears were scattered across the floor. Girly clothes were thrown around the room. Emma blinked in disbelief, rooted to the spot, frozen by what he was seeing. He stepped forward, but before he could process what was happening, another flash of white light blinded him again. This time, a high-pitched scream filled his ears, causing him to wince in pain. When his vision cleared, the room was back to its original, plain state. Emma stood there, panting as if he had just run a marathon, his hand trembling slightly. His mouth hung open, stunned and horrified. "What the foo?" he gasped, breathless and confused. His eyes watered as fear overtook him. He blinked again, processing the bizarre experience. Nothing jumped out at him, and nothing seemed to have changed. The only sound was the crashing of the waves outside, filtering in through the open window. Emma snapped out of his trance and rushed to the door, but it wouldn't open. He pulled on the doorknob, but it was locked tight. He kicked the frame with his foot, pulling the handle with all his strength, but it wouldn't budge. Panic began to rise within him, his breathing quick and shallow. He banged on the door with his fists, desperate to escape. "Come on, Rob, stop messing around," Emma shouted, but there was no response. He called for Rob again, but only silence answered him. The fear started to creep in. He ran to the window and tried to turn the handles, but they wouldn't move either. He was trapped. His panic grew, and he frantically searched the room for an escape. He knew that if he could just get out of the room, he would leave the house and never come back. The claustrophobia was overwhelming, and he had never felt so terrified in his life. His hands gripped his head, his mind racing, eyes wide with fear. He banged on the door again, but still, there was no reply from Rob. "Oh God," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Oh good God." He turned toward the window, knowing he had to break it open. It was his only chance to escape. As he ran toward it, a sudden, invisible force drained the breath from his lungs, making him collapse to his knees. Gasping for air, he clutched his sides, choking and struggling as time seemed to stretch on. A strange tingling energy coursed through his body, but before he could process what was happening, he felt as though his insides were writhing like he'd swallowed live creatures. He doubled over, ready to be sick, but then a strange, almost pleasurable sensation spread from his groin, traveling to his fingertips and toes. He gasped, taking in quick breaths, and for a moment, it seemed like the feeling would pass. Then, a shiver ran down his spine, his skin prickling with goosebumps. His whole body felt like it was being tickled by invisible feathers. He blinked in disbelief as his hands began to shrink before his eyes. His fingers thinned, his nails grew longer, and a wave of pure terror overtook him. Though it wasn't painful, he screamed in shock, a cry so loud it could have shattered glass. But Rob, who should have been nearby, didn't respond. It felt as if Rob wasn't even there. Emma tried to stand, but his knees buckled, and he collapsed sideways, gripping the wall for support. His shoulders shrank, and he felt an odd sensation down his back as his hair grew rapidly. Help, he groaned, panic creeping into his voice. His muscles began to vanish, leaving him thin and fragile. His body reshaped, new layers of fat distributing across his hips, thighs, and rear. His waist tightened, and his breathing became labored, as though someone was squeezing him. His thighs widened, causing his pants to cling to his changing hips. Emma lurched forward as his bones shifted, his frame shrinking as his skeleton morphed into something smaller, more feminine. He cried out for Rob again, but like before, there was no answer. The transformation wasn't painful, but the pressure on his face was unbearable. His nose reshaped into a small, cute button, and his square jawline softened. His lips plumped up, forming a full, feminine pout. His lashes grew thicker and longer, and his hair cascaded down his back, silky and brunette. Emma could feel the changes happening, could see the fat in his bottom forming, but his attention was drawn to his groin. The pleasant sensation escalated to an unbearable level. When he looked down, His manhood was shrinking before his eyes. "No," he cried out, his voice cracking mid-sentence into a higher pitch. He tried to hold on to what was left of his masculinity, but it was too late. A new slit formed in its place, and he could no longer bear to watch. The transformation was too surreal, too frightening. His hands clutched his thick, new hair in shock, as his insides seemed to burn with the changes happening inside him. His chest expanded with pressure, and the fabric of his shirt tightened as his chests grew. His pants were now uncomfortably tight around his hips and rear, as two round, perky chests formed on his chest. The final stages of the transformation were taking place. His body hair vanished, his skin smoothed and softened into a delicate, feminine texture. He was trapped in his room, unable to escape the relentless changes. His mind was clouded with confusion, disbelief, and fear. It felt like a dream, but the longer it went on, the more real it seemed. There was no waking up from this. Emma stumbled sideways, his new center of gravity throwing him off balance. He collapsed onto the bed, gasping, repeating over and over, "It's not real, it's not real, it can't be real." Slowly, he slid off the bed and onto the floor. His long, thick hair fell over his face as he shakily parted it, feeling the weight of his new chests pressing against his chest. The absence between his legs was chilling, a horrible reminder of what had just happened. Had it ended? Was it over? He couldn't believe what had happened to his body. It seemed physically impossible to change gender so suddenly. The weight of his hair irritated his eyes, but he pushed it back as he stumbled toward the mirror. When he saw his reflection, he screamed in shock. His tiny hands trembled as they grasped the new, unfamiliar curves of his chest. His face had completely changed, his jawline was smooth and soft, his nose small and button-like, his lips plump and feminine. His eyes, his large, sparkling green eyes, shone with panic. His hair was thick and brunette, cascading down his back, and the girl in the mirror was strikingly beautiful, around 16 or 17. Emma couldn't take his eyes off his reflection. His tiny hands touched his smooth skin, and he traced the curve of his new body. He couldn't stop trembling, unsure whether to scream or cry. His voice, now soft and high-pitched, trembled as he whimpered, gripping his new, fuller hips. "What the hell?" he whispered in disbelief, his hands trembling as they gripped his new body. He paced back and forth across the room, unable to stop muttering, "It's not real, it's not real, it can't be real." His hands were behind his head, his thoughts a whirlwind of disbelief and panic. His new body felt so alien, and he couldn't make sense of what had happened. Despite the confusion, he couldn't deny that it felt real. The sensation was undeniable. He tried the door again, but it was still locked. Emma bit his lip, unable to look at himself, afraid to face the truth of what he was becoming. Just then, a sharp scream echoed through the house, sending a cold shiver down his spine. "Rob!" Emma screamed, pounding on the door with his small, delicate fists. The weight of his panic overwhelmed him as he struggled to help, not realizing that his voice had shifted to a soft, feminine tone. Another scream rang out from Rob. "Neil!" Emma cried, now on the verge of tears. He paused, his hands still pressed to the door. His eyes landed on the trunk at the foot of the bed, and he rushed over to it, hoping to use it to break the window. His thin arms shook, and he could barely lift the heavy trunk before it fell from his hands, landing on the floor with a heavy thud. Out of breath, Emma gasped in frustration. "What's going on?" he muttered. Rob's scream sounded again, and Emma felt utterly helpless. His mind raced. How was he going to escape this strange nightmare? He rushed to the door once more, shouting for Rob, but there was no answer. The room felt suffocating as his eyes scanned the empty space. Then, a blinding flash of light filled the room. Emma screamed, shielding his eyes from the burning light. He stumbled backward, falling onto his behind as the bright flash overwhelmed him. His vision quickly returned, but the room had transformed again, back to the girl's bedroom he had seen in his earlier vision. His mouth hung open in shock, and his knees trembled as he glanced around. The boy band posters, makeup station,
teddy bears, and girlish clothes now surrounded him, making him feel trapped in some kind of twisted prison. His heart pounded in his chest. He looked down at his new body, his slender stomach, wide thighs, long legs, and the unmistakable presence of chests. He sat on the ground, staring at his transformed form with a mix of awe and disbelief. Then, the transformation continued. His oversized boy clothes began to change. His white sneakers turned brown, growing a small heel, and the laces fused together, transforming into buckle straps. Emma froze, his eyes widening in disbelief as his sneakers morphed into school shoes. His legs refused to move apart, as the denim of his jeans fused together, shortening above his knees and exposing his smooth, bare legs. He now wore a tight blue denim skirt, which immediately turned grey with pleats at the hem. "Oh no!" Emma cried in his high-pitched voice. "Rob, where the hell are you?" The fabric shifted again, pulling itself tighter around his hips. Emma felt the fabric of his boxer shorts tighten and change into satin knickers, a sensation that made his face burn with embarrassment. His socks stretched up his legs, forming black tights that clung to his slender thighs. His t-shirt split down the middle and reformed into a white, cotton blouse with a collar, its sleeves growing longer until they reached his wrists, tightening into stiff cuffs. His new blouse hugged his chest and arms as it tucked itself into his skirt, zipping up to fasten tightly around his waist. He felt the tightness in his chest as a white bra appeared, securing itself around his new chests and lifting them up. He cringed, desperate for someone to save him, but it was impossible, he was alone. A light blue sweater appeared over his blouse, a matching tie materializing beneath the collar. His long, thick brunette hair, now halfway down his back, softened and brushed itself out. A light blue hairband appeared, completing his transformation. He let out a sharp, girlish scream that echoed in the empty room, but no one heard him. No one could. "Oh God, please, no," he whimpered, staring at his changed body. "Stop, stop. Whoever you are, just stop. I don't want this." He gripped his chest, checking if what he was feeling was real, his mouth agape with shock. He then ran his trembling hand down his back and over his hips, which had changed shape. He touched his face again, feeling his new nose and lips. Exhausted, he slid down against the door, his body hitting the floor softly. Tears welled up in his eyes, and for the first time since he was 8 years old, he felt like crying. Emma sat there, staring at the girlish room around him, a sense of disturbance rising in his chest. He rocked back and forth, repeating, "This can't be real, it's crazy, this can't be real, this is insane." Suddenly, a loud roar from Rob in the other room snapped him out of his daze. On the other side of the hall, Rob clutched his sides, gritting his teeth, eyes watering. He, too, was locked in his room, unable to escape. He leaned against the wall, struggling to stand as a strange tingling sensation spread throughout his body. He could hardly speak as the overwhelming sensation took over, almost as if someone were tickling him from the inside. His muscles began to shrink, his body shifting. His arms became thin and bony, his abs disappearing. His hand shook as he touched his abdomen, feeling his ribs poking through his skin. "No. What's happening to me?" he groaned. Slowly, fat began to redistribute across his body, and his shape changed. His hips widened, and his pants grew tighter. His shoulders thinned, and his height increased as his legs grew longer. He staggered towards the bathroom but struggled to stay upright. "Rob, are you okay?" a voice from Emma's room called. "No," Rob yelled, stumbling into the bathroom, his face hitting the cold tiles. He quickly looked up at the mirror and froze in shock. His face was changing. His eyes widened, the green color swirling into blue. His lashes thickened, his cheekbones sharpened, and his lips became fuller. His nose softened and his jawline became smoother, his neck lengthening as his Adam's apple disappeared. "This can't be happening," Rob gasped, touching his face. He stared in horror as his features continued to shift, and he felt his chest swell. His shirt buttons popped open as his body transformed. His hair grew rapidly, cascading down his back, turning from brown to blonde. Rob was unable to comprehend what was happening. The transformation was too bizarre, too impossible. He felt his body change further, his clothes shifting with him. His polo shirt tightened around his chest before transforming into a soft white blouse. He couldn't find the words to react, swinging his head to adjust to his new long blonde hair. He felt his jeans tighten around his legs before they merged into a skirt. "Help!" Rob cried, his voice now different, softer. His jeans morphed into a pencil skirt, his undergarments changed into something softer. His shirt reformed and tucked itself into the new outfit. His shoes turned into high heels, and he felt his feet wobble as the shoes adjusted. His long blonde hair rolled into an elegant style, and makeup subtly appeared on his face, completing his transformation. "This can't be real," he screamed, overwhelmed by the changes. Rob couldn't take it anymore. He had to escape this nightmare, so he struggled out of the bathroom, finding it difficult to move in the tight skirt and heels. He made his way to his bedroom, and to his shock, it had completely changed with a flash of white light. He looked around, his mouth hanging open in disbelief. The room was completely transformed, with a large bed, a wardrobe, a makeup table, and walls decorated in cream and maroon. The carpet was a soft cream, and everything was neatly arranged. He stopped pacing and slowly walked toward the bed, unsure of what to expect next. He sat down on the bed, trying to process everything. "What is happening?" he whispered. Meanwhile, in Emma's room, he sat on the bed, looking at his small hands and slender fingers. He ran his hand through his long brunette hair, feeling the soft strands. He stared at himself, confusion and fear filling his mind. "Why?" he murmured. He looked down and placed his hand on his chest, feeling the fabric of his sweater and the softness of his skin. He touched his thigh, feeling how different his body was now. A deep sigh escaped him, his emotions overwhelming him as he tried to hold back tears. Why is this happening? He wondered. In Rob's room, he was doing the same, touching his new body, trying to process the changes. His face felt different, older, and he walked shakily over to a full-length mirror. Despite his reluctance, something pushed him to look. He froze as he saw his reflection, elegant curves, a perfectly styled hairdo, and an appearance that seemed out of another era. His eyes widened in shock as he took in the details of his transformed look. He quickly turned away as he heard the door click open. Emma's bedroom door clicked open as well, and both of them stepped out, eyes wide with shock as they saw each other across the hallway. Rob was panting, his hands gripping the door frame, clearly shaken. Emma, too, was frozen in disbelief. "Rob," Emma said softly, his voice almost a whisper. "Emma!" Rob gasped, his voice full of confusion. They stared at each other in silence for a long moment, neither able to fully grasp what they were seeing. Slowly, Emma walked out of his room, never taking his eyes off of Rob. Rob did the same, cautiously stepping forward, moving awkwardly in his new form. They met in the middle of the hallway, neither of them sure of what to say. Emma looked at Rob, searching for any trace of his old friend, but there was nothing familiar about the person standing before him. Rob looked at Emma, confused and disoriented, trying to convince himself that this was truly Emma, not some twisted joke. Neither of them could find the right words. Emma studied Rob, taking in his elegant appearance, his neat blouse, pencil skirt, and perfectly styled hair. If this was truly Rob, he had changed in every way. Rob looked at Emma, taking in the schoolgirl's outfit, her bright eyes, and her youthful appearance. He struggled to believe that this was Emma, now looking so different from the person he once knew. Finally, Rob spoke. "What happened to us?" he whispered. "I have no idea," Emma replied, closing his eyes, hoping this was just a nightmare. "Everything has changed," Rob said, his voice trembling. Tears began to fall from Rob's eyes. He quickly wiped them away, trying to mask his emotions. "You're older?" Emma asked. "And you're younger," Rob responded. "Not by much though," Emma said, finally tearing his gaze away from Rob's face. Suddenly, Their faces turned bright red. Emma, feeling deeply embarrassed by his appearance, quickly looked away, not wanting to acknowledge his new body and attire. Instead of looking at Rob, Emma's gaze shifted to the walls. His heart skipped a beat as he focused on the pictures that now adorned them. His eyes widened in shock as he saw a photograph of his new female persona, looking younger and incredibly happy, posing with a smiling older woman who seemed to be her mother. Emma realized with horror that the woman was Rob. "Oh my God!" Rob gasped, raising his hand to his mouth in disbelief. Emma's eyes scanned the pictures as he walked down the hallway, his mind racing. They were all pictures of Emma and Rob's female forms. One showed Emma as a young girl in ballet gear, while another featured Rob's female form in a beautiful summer dress, smiling beside the girl Emma had become. A wave of fear and confusion washed over Emma as the full weight of the situation hit him. He turned to Rob, his hands on his head in disbelief. "Who the hell have we turned into?" he yelled, his voice filled with panic. Rob seemed to break down completely, tears streaming down his face. I don't know what's happening, Emma," Rob cried. "Please, don't shout. Don't shout." Emma echoed incredulously. "We've both transformed into women, and you're telling me not to shout? I need answers. What's happening to us? Who are we now?" Rob rushed past Emma, bumping into him as he walked with shaky steps, kicking off his heels and stumbling down the stairs. Emma, breathing heavily, followed Rob, stopping at the foot of the stairs as he looked around. The house now seemed warm and welcoming, decorated like a cozy family home, in stark contrast to the cold emptiness he had felt earlier. Emma shook his head, unable to believe his eyes. He walked across the hall and entered the kitchen, where Rob had collapsed at the table, sobbing uncontrollably. Emma, unused to seeing Rob so vulnerable, slowly walked over and placed a hand on his back, feeling the soft fabric of his blouse. I don't think I've ever been this emotional before," Rob said, his voice a little calmer. Emma didn't reply, his focus elsewhere. He didn't want to assume this was part of the transformation, but he couldn't deny the strange feelings and confusion. Why did this happen? Who was behind it? And why were they going through this? Looking around the kitchen, Emma noticed how everything was well organized. Pots, pans, plates, and cutlery had appeared, and an apron hung beside the stove. His eyes were blurry, not from tears, but from the overwhelming realization of what was happening. He couldn't believe this was real. "We need to leave," Emma muttered. "What?" Rob jumped up, looking shocked. "I'm not going outside looking like this. If we stay here any longer, God knows what else this place will do to us," Emma replied. Rob looked around, still taking in the changes to the house. His nails brushed the countertop as his gaze landed on the stove. "This is creepy," he said, looking at the apron. "How did this happen?" "I don't know," Emma replied quietly. "What if there's no way back? What if we're stuck like this forever?" Rob stuttered, his voice trembling with fear. "Don't say that," Emma shouted, already feeling overwhelmed. An uncomfortable silence filled the room. Emma looked into Rob's eyes, both of them struggling to make sense of the situation. "Everything has changed," Rob whispered fearfully. "What are we going to do?" "Like I said, we have to leave now and hope that the changes reverse when we get out of this place," Emma insisted. "I don't know," Rob began, unable to finish his sentence, still too afraid to leave. "Fine," Emma yelled, storming out of the kitchen. He marched toward the front door and threw it open. Rob quickly followed, his tight skirt limiting his speed. By the time Rob screamed, "Please don't leave me here," Emma was already outside, past the gate. Emma's rage fueled his stride as he walked toward the town, the sea breeze brushing against his bare legs. He flattened down his skirt, feeling the wind rush inside it. His long, brunette hair blew across his face, and he struggled to push it out of his mouth. As he walked down the main street, pedestrians smiled at him as if they knew him. Teenage boys in uniforms glanced at him curiously. Schoolgirls passed by in similar outfits, wondering who he was. Emma felt the eyes on him and broke into a run, trying to escape the sudden attention as he sprinted down the street. For the first time, Emma felt the strange sensation of his body moving differently with each step. His shoes weren't built for running, and he could feel them struggling with every step. His stockings slipped down to his ankles, and he hadn't realized how feminine his movements looked, his hips swaying and his skirt shifting with every step. His mind was racing, and his breath grew more strained as he neared the end of the street, rounding the corner toward the edge of the town. In minutes, he reached the end of the town, stopping near a large wooden billboard that had a painting of a sunny beach with a happy family. The text read, "Come back soon." Emma stood still in the middle of the road, panting heavily, staring at the green countryside. He felt an invisible force holding him back, preventing him from stepping beyond the sign. His foot hovered, but he couldn't move forward, as though something was physically pulling him back. "Why can't I leave?" he asked aloud, his voice tinged with frustration. Emma tried again and again, but each time he was stopped, unable to move beyond his spot. He sat down by the road, feeling helpless and defeated, his mind overwhelmed by confusion.